Many parents and professional instructors find teaching spelling more than a little challenging, so it is my pleasure to share my insights with you. Please bear in mind I will be discussing the teaching of spelling, assuming that the child has already learned the alphabet and already knows their base phonics, say up through two-letter blends. Spelling's importance in writing is indisputable, but it is also crucial in the development of reading and elocution. Studies have repeatedly proven that the study of spelling makes weak readers stronger, and strong readers even more so. A good spelling program will also build vocabulary and expand phonemic awareness, developing a virtuous cycle of literacy achievement. A child who knows and uses more words also tends to find other unrelated subjects like history, civics, and science easier. To begin, let me clear up a common misconception. While a good speller is always a good reader may not always be a good speller. Reading provides context, while spelling, executed in a manner separated from a context, requires that the student actually be able either to follow the word phonetically or draw it from memory. This naturally leads us into the how of spelling instruction. You must realize from the outset that no one approach to teaching spelling will work with all children. Each child's unique cognitive structure and development will determine which approach is best. Above all, you must hold one crucial fact in mind. Spelling, like music and driving and most sports skills, is a mastery skill. A mastery skill is one which one develops to such an extent that executing it becomes second nature, as natural as walking and talking. One wishes to develop one's spelling skills to the point where writing, for example in an email, is as natural and fluid as speaking. Any method of teaching spelling must be measured against the yardstick of leading the student to achieve mastery. Broadly speaking, there are three approaches to teaching spelling. First, there are memorization-focused approaches. Second, there are deductive approaches. And finally, third, there are inductive approaches. The memorization-focused approaches are reasonably described as the traditional means of spelling instruction. It is how I learned as a child in the 60s and 70s. The teacher provides a list of words, often thematically related, at the beginning of the week. The student studies them and then takes a test, typically at the end of the week. The words are then forgotten as the teacher moves on. Contrary to what many people think, memorization-focused programs can actually work pretty well for a small number of students and lead them to mastery. It worked remarkably well for me. It is easy to teach a memorization-focused program, and a student who has a particularly strong memory can use such an approach with a reasonable prospect of success. I would estimate about 5% of students will succeed using such a program. Deductive approaches are what I call the siren song approach. Such an approach teaches a set of spelling rules which the student will then apply to new and unknown words. The hope and expectation is that spelling can be learned in the same manner mathematics and science are learned, systematically and rationally. I call this the siren song approach because, while it sounds really great, when you actually face the reality of it, you find yourself either falling back on an inductive approach or a memorization-focused approach to achieve mastery. The reason for this is simple. While there are a fixed and limited number of phonics rules in English, 82 to be specific, there are literally hundreds of English spelling rules that have to be learned if the rule set is to encompass all of the exceptions to the more common base rules. Most of these rules are very complex, and it can reasonably be said they exist outside the cognitive reach of a child of 6 to 10 years old. Very few adults know them, and they're impossible to apply in real time, in other words, as one writes. This explicitly defeats the goal of achieving mastery and provides the impetus to fall back on an inductive or memory-focused approach. Still, there are children who experience anxiety if they don't have a rule-like structure, and there are children who, just by their nature and gifts, can learn to apply complex rule sets on the fly, as it were. For either of these children, I would estimate perhaps 15%, this approach can be very effective, or at least cause the minimum of anxiety. Be prepared as the instructor, however. Deductive approaches to spelling instruction consume a great deal of teacher prep time. Finally are the inductive methods. These methods focus on an intuitive learning of English orthography based on rhymes or word families, which are consistent patterns of vowels and consonants that recur through a set of otherwise unrelated words. This approach is very phonetically dependent and experiential. It is learning by doing, if you will. It has the advantage that instruction is specifically geared to develop spelling as a mastery skill. It is strictly analogous to a child practicing piano by playing scales or developing batting skills in baseball by going to the batting cage. Its greatest weakness is also its greatest strength. The student and teacher have to agree to be very fault-tolerant. Children who feel a high level of anxiety when they get something wrong are those who might want to consider a deductive approach. There are going to be a lot of errors, just as every child learning piano strikes plenty of wrong keys, and anyone learning to bat in baseball or softball misses a great many pitches. Like the memorization-focused approaches, since the instructor doesn't have to learn the rules to teach the rules, it takes up as little time as a memory-focused program and is generally much more effective. I would estimate fully 80% of all students will find more success inductively than by any other method. Beyond the paper and pencil, or screen and keyboard, teaching of spelling, there's another element of great importance: modeling vocabulary and usage for your child. You should always try to speak to your children as if they were adults. Don't lower the level of vocabulary when you speak to your child. Studies repeatedly show that children both understand many more words than they use, and that they learn more words mostly from their parents, not peers or other adults, even teachers in institutional schools. Modeling strong vocabulary and proper usage will feed back into both their spelling and their other studies. Encourage them to ask what words mean, and be open and ready to explain. Praise them for the correct usage of new words, and gently correct them when a connotation is just a little off. Another great side effect of a strong speller is a child whose elocution goes beyond their age level and stands them in good stead in their other studies. So, to summarize briefly, there are 3 approaches to teaching spelling. Memorization works well for children with strong memories and makes very few demands for instructor prep time. The downside is most children don't have strong enough memories to use this approach to achieve mastery. Deductive approaches provide comfort of structure from its rules and works well for students who need highly ordered learning environments or who suffer great anxiety from giving wrong answers. The downside is the rules are too abstract and complex for young children to reasonably be expected to engage them, and the teacher prep time is immense. Mastery generally remains elusive for students who use a deductive approach. Inductive programs have the advantage of utilizing the student's natural learning process, lead relatively more quickly to mastery, and place very few demands on the teacher for prep time. The downside is the student and teacher have to be willing to tolerate a high level of trial and error, the emphasis on error. The conclusion to my message is this: gear your instructional approach to the student. Be willing to abandon one that you try and find does not work. No one approach or program works for every child. The goal is to achieve mastery that makes for a confident reader and especially writer. Every other subject in school depends on the ability to read and express oneself, and so this study of spelling is absolutely foundational.